The sun had already slipped behind the Dragoon Mountains when Elias Thorne heard the groan of splintering mesquite. He was on his knees in the corral, prying a rusted nail from the hoof of his last mare, when the sound came again, louder, like a tree giving up its life. Dust rose in a red column beyond the windmill. Elias straightened, joints popping, and shaded his eyes. What stepped from the haze was impossible. A girl, taller than the barn, skin the color of river clay, black hair braided with hawk feathers that brushed the sky. She staggered, one hand clutching her side, the other reaching for the trough as if it were a thimble. Water sloshed over the rim and ran in silver threads down her wrist. She drank until the trough rang empty, then sank to her knees, the earth shuddering beneath her. Elias' first instinct was to run. The second was to reload the Winchester leaning against the fence. But the hill's eyes, dark, exhausted, ancient, locked on his. In them he saw his daughter, Rosa, the day the fever took her, Ismael, lost, begging for one more sip. The rifle stayed where it was. Easy, niña, he whispered, though she towered over the rooftops. He dragged the hose from the well, cranked the pump until his shoulders burned, and aimed the weak stream at her cracked lips. She caught the water in cupped hands the size of wagon beds, drinking until the pump coughed air. When she lowered her hands, a single tear, clear as winter runoff, cut a channel through the dust on her cheek and fell. It struck the ground like a meteor, carving a puddle deep enough to drown a calf. Gracias, she said, voice rolling like distant thunder. Then she curled against the cottonwood, asleep before her head touched the roots. Elías stood watch until the stars came out. He told himself he was guarding the livestock. Truth was, he couldn't leave her alone with the night. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and gun oil. Elías was frying salt pork when the horizon rippled. 300 Apache warriors crested the ridge, feathers flickering like signal fires, lances catching the sun. They moved in perfect silence, ponies the color of storm clouds. Elías' hand found the rifle butt, then let go. Running was pointless, the mare couldn't outpace a hawk shadow. He stepped onto the porch, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped sparrow. The lead rider raised a hand. The line halted. Between the warriors walked the giant girl, now no taller than Elias himself, barefoot in a doeskin dress, braid swinging at her waist. She looked 16, maybe 17, except for her eyes, those were older than the mountains. The warrior beside her was broad as an anvil, face painted with ochre lightning. He studied Elias the way a man studies a rattler called in his boot. The girl spoke in rapid Apache, gestures sharp as thrown knives. The warrior's gaze flicked to the empty trough, the hose still dripping, the puddle now a mirror reflecting sky. Something shifted in his face, surprise, maybe respect. Elías cleared his throat. Coffee is hot. Bacon's almost ready. You're welcome to it. The girl translated. A ripple of laughter crossed the warriors like wind over wheat. The leader dismounted, handed his reins to a boy no older than 12, and climbed the steps. Up close, Elias saw the scar that ran from the man's hair to his collarbone, old, bali, earned in a fight that left stories in its wake. I am Nantan, the man said in careful Spanish. This is my daughter, Taza. You gave her water when the desert tried to claim her. Elías shrugged, suddenly aware of how small his porch was. Any man would have done the same. No, Taza said. Her voice carried the echo of last week's thunder. Most would have shot first. Baying here, the warriors dismounted. Children darted between pony legs. Women unpacked bundles of dried venison, blue corn, jars of prickly pear honey. The ranch yard filled with the smell of mesquite smoke and laughter. Elías' solitary table groaned under the weight of shared food. He found himself passing plates to men who yesterday would have scalped him for the land beneath his boots. Taza sat cross-legged by the corral, teaching Elías' mare to take sugar from her palm. The horse, usually skittish around strangers, licked the cubes gently. Elias watched from the fence, coffee cooling in his hand. She was cursed, Nantan said, appearing beside him. A rival shaman shrank her to punish me. The spell breaks only when someone outside the tribe offers life without expecting payment. Elías snorted. Sounds like a tall tale. Nantan's smile was thin but real. Tall tales keep children alive. Night fell purple and gold. The Apaches built a fire ringed with stones the size of wagon wheels. someone produced a flute carved from cedar. Notes floated up, tangled with coyote song. Elias leaned against the barn, boots crossed, listening to stories in 2 languages. He learned Taza had walked 3 days without water, carrying her little brother on her back until the boy died at sunrise. Chica buried him under a palo verde and kept walking, too tall for grief to fit inside her anymore. When the fire burned low, Taza approached Elias carrying a pouch of soft deerskin. Inside lay a single turquoise bead, smooth as a river stone. For the water, she said. Elias turned the bead over in his calloused palm. Ibe got nothing to give back. You already did. She touched the hollow at her throat where the desert had tried to close. My father says debts must be paid in full. Bat kindness, her eyes shone with starlight, kindness grows when you try to repay it. She pressed the bead into his hand and closed his fingers around it. Then she did something that stopped his heart, she hugged him. Her arms, now human-sized, were strong enough to crack ribs, gentle enough to cradle a sparrow. Elías smelled sage and sweat and the faint sweetness of cottonwood sap. For the first time since Rosa's funeral, he cried without shame. At dawn the Apaches rode out, ponies kicking up dust devils that danced like spirits. Taza waved until the ridge swallowed her. Elías stood on the porch long after the last hoofbeat faded, turquoise bead warm against his chest on a rawhide cord. Saison's turn. The ranch prospered in ways Elias couldn't explain. Wells that had run dry bubbled again. Calves dropped healthy and twin. Strangers passing through left with full bellies and stories of the old men who fed anyone who knocked, no questions asked. One spring evening, a year to the day, the wind carried flute music across the flats. Elías stepped outside, esquinting. A single rider approached, Esmal, braided, familiar. Taza dismounted, leading a pinto packed with bundles. Behind her walked a boy of 6 or 7, black hair, serious eyes, clutching a wooden horse. My brother, Taza said simply. The desert gave him back. The boy stared at Elias with the same ancient gaze. Then he ran forward and wrapped his arms around Elias' knees. Elías lifted him, felt the weight of a second chance settle in his arms like warm bread. That night they ate under the cottonwood. The boy fell asleep against Elias' side, thumb in mouth. Taza strung the turquoise bead onto a new cord, added a tiny silver bell that chimed when she left. Father says the curse is broken for good, she told him. But the blessing, it stays. Elías looked at the stars spilling across the sky like spilled salt. Reckon Ibe got room for one more hand around here. Taza's smile could have lit the dark side of the moon. Guille start with mending fences. Then Guille see about the rest. Years later, travelers spoke of a ranch where the coffee was always hot and the door never locked. They said if you arrived thirsty, you left with water for the soul. Children grew up hearing how a giant girl once drank a trough dry and paid for it with a nation's gratitude. Old men claimed the wind still carried flute music on certain nights, and if you listened close, you could hear a bell chiming in answer. Elías Thorne died on a morning when the Ocotillo bloomed red as Apache war paint. They buried him under the cottonwood, turquoise bead around his neck. Taza, now a woman with laugh lines and 3 children of her own, stood at the grave and spoke the only words that mattered. He gave water to a stranger. The desert remembered. And somewhere, in the hush between heartbeats, the giant girl walked again, tall as hope, gentle as rain, carrying a canteen that never ran dry.